Hi everybody. As per usual, it's kind of been a minute since I've shared. Didn't spend any time in the hospital this time, so it was just life and shit. I went to Phoenix this last week to graduate, and then we went through Tucson on the way back to visit my sister, and then got back to Texas on Saturday. And it's been definitely a long few weeks leading up to that. I was behind in my previous classes that I was taking while I was in the inpatient unit, and so I finally managed to catch up on those and turn in my research paper late, but I actually scored really well on it, and I am in my Capstone course, which is basically taking that research paper and turning it into a professional paper slash experimental design, I guess. So super fun stuff, definitely still stressful, but not as stressful because it's the only class that I'm taking right now. And honestly, at the end of the day, I have 6 weeks left until I graduate, which is insane because, I mean, I've been doing this for 4 years now, a little over 4 years, and it was so hard to picture that finish line, and now it's almost here, and it feels kind of weird. But I do want to share, obviously, a poem because that's pretty much one of the common themes on all of these videos, but I also kind of want to share a little bit of what I did my research on and wrote about for my research paper and now my capstone project, which it kind of started out rough because I didn't realize that this research class was the pre-runner to the capstone, and that whatever topic I chose to write about in that class was going to be the topic for my capstone. So I ended up changing topics 2 weeks before the paper was due because I finally realized that and knew that I wanted to write about adolescent abnormal psychology and not what I had chosen as my topic previously. So in the process of kind of looking into adolescent abnormal psychology and also doing trauma therapy and group therapy and working through my own mental disorders and symptoms, I kind of got stuck on the I guess the spectrum where I'm at, where I have ADHD, but I also show some serious like OCD symptoms and behaviors, and it got me into a place where I was really looking into kind of what the difference is between impulsivity and compulsivity, and how to recognize when I'm behaving impulsively and when I'm I guess repeating compulsive behaviors and stuff. And in that whole process, it kind of got me on the subject of comorbid mental illness, which comorbid, for those of you who don't know, means that it is a coexisting illness, a dual diagnosis, basically. And it doesn't only apply to mental illness. Comorbidity is anything like physical, mental, like any sort of sickness that is occurring alongside another sickness or mental disorder. But my research topic was on comorbid mental illnesses, so multiple mental illnesses or disorders that people deal with together, and how that affects their well-being and stuff. I kind of started to focus in adolescence, and part of the hypothesis concerns whether the occurrence of comorbid mental illnesses rise from the transition between childhood and adulthood, and then the other was a look at whether adolescents who had a dual diagnosis of both internalizing or externalizing mental disorders fared versus those who had opposite diagnoses. So they have both an internalizing and an externalizing disorder, which that basically means your symptoms are like directed internally or externally. So anxiety, depression, all of those are internal, whereas like substance abuse disorder and like a totally blinking. Behavioral disorders and stuff like that, those are all externalizing. So it's definitely a very in-depth subject, and it's a topic that I'm kind of enjoying because obviously I like to get to know all the aspects of mental health, especially when I feel like I can relate to them. Which, being a psychology student with trauma and comorbid mental illnesses is hard in and of itself because I recognize so much of myself in what I learn, and I have to remind myself that this is all a process and I'm working on all of these things. And a lot of mental disorders have common symptoms among various ones, and that just because I'm dealing with these symptoms doesn't mean that it's anything different than what I have already been diagnosed with, and that I don't need to worry about these things. I know going through the diagnostic process for getting diagnosed with ADHD, I became very concerned for a minute that maybe I am bipolar, and that's why all of these symptoms are the way they are. But it's kind of insane how the um, the different kind of mental illnesses like that there are can be so similar, but there are also these other things that kind of set them apart from each other. And I didn't know until learning about the ADHD symptoms after my diagnosis that my rage issues and irritability and like um, impulsiveness and all of that. Well, obviously impulsiveness is ADHD, but just like the mood swings and stuff was ADHD. I always thought that it was a product of my depression, and then there was a while where I thought like, oh, I am pretty sure that I have borderline personality disorder. Like um, I'm very vindictive. I'll lash out at people. I I really try to hurt people when they hurt me, and I know that's not normal. But my therapist have always pointed out the fact that I am aware of those things makes it pretty apparent that it's not a personality disorder simply because like I know where I struggle and what I need to work on, I guess. But some of the notes that I took for like the um, kind of spectrum between OCD symptoms and ADHD symptoms and compulsiveness versus impulsiveness are, I think it's actually a combination of notes between that and one of my group therapy sessions when we were looking at ourselves and kind of discussing vulnerability and stuff. But I know like on one side I wrote down headstrong, control freak, obsessive, both compulsive and impulsive. So it wasn't a comparison, I guess. Emotionally insecure, and then selfish, but also selfless with a question mark, because obviously, like, who's okay with being an oxymoron? And then on the other side, I wrote down vulnerability because it's kind of the basis of getting to where you can heal, I guess, is knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable and just recognizing that it's a risk that you have to take, I guess. So some of my notes from therapy with that were that it is the core of shame and loneliness, but it's also the birthplace of love and acceptance, um, which I mean is super important because it's where we struggle with being vulnerable with others because we don't want them to like see the things that we're ashamed of and stuff. But it's only by sharing that we can actually find love and acceptance from people. When we hide those parts of ourselves and build relationships, then there's always going to be the chance later on that whenever all of that comes out, it's just not going to work because you kept those important parts of yourself. And whether it doesn't work because you weren't open from the start, or it doesn't work because it's just something that creates an incompatibility, like it doesn't really matter, because if we're not taking risks, then we're not living the way that we can live, or we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to experience all of the abundantly wonderful things that can come from life versus only the sadness and the dark things. So it has been an interesting few weeks of going through therapy, working on my trauma healing, and getting to know myself a little bit more, spending more time with the people in my life, and having realizations about changes that need to happen over the next few months. And it's rough, but it obviously always leads to a lot of good writing. So I guess there's one of those silver linings that we look for. But speaking of writing, because I don't want to make another 20-minute video like I did last time, I'm going to go ahead and share I guess the poem that I've been working on most recently, which part of it actually came to me in the process of driving through New Mexico, and I couldn't just whip out my notebook and write stuff down. So I grabbed a pen and started writing it down on my leg, and my husband was very concerned with what I was doing, but it was just something that I needed to write, and also that I wasn't ready to say out loud yet. So I wrote it on my leg, and then I got home and I started working on it sometime Saturday, and I finished it today. So I do not have a title, but this is it. I feel so disconnected in a time of such connection. My ideals are so out of place in a world where so many have no place. It's really a shame to see so many in pain, some slowly going insane from the stress and the blame. I feel all of it, usually from others, but I tend to ignore myself, and when I feel my own pain, my reason suffers. My will becomes weak, and there is nothing that buffers this aching in my soul, this insatiable drive to know that I am means something. I know I do, but sometimes it just doesn't show, and I feel emptiness when I let my tears flow. When I'm gone, some will find their memories of me fond. Others may be grateful that my soul has moved along, and everyone will recognize how often I was not strong. They will realize how I was just barely holding it together, singing my song, never planning to stay long, waiting for a moment that just didn't feel wrong. Sometimes I forget to cherish life, and I drain myself for others, adding to my strife. I do this to myself. So reading that out loud, obviously, now, I mean, not obviously, you guys can't be inside of my head, but it doesn't really feel finished like I thought it was, so I'm actually probably going to work on that a little bit more, but fingers crossed that I make another video a lot sooner than this one, and have a good week, everybody.